For those of y'all just tuning in, this is in my humble opinion exclusive called Save the City. We have all been concerned with the recent violence uprising that has been taking place, and we have a group of people here that love and want to make change. Right. So at this particular time, I'm gonna kick it over to my brother Charles Lewis and the questions that he has for the chief, the mayor, Charlottesville tomorrow, and Shadee. All right.
Yeah, well, thank you all again for joining us. So in this last half hour, maybe a couple of segments left at the most, and I appreciate the conversation, really do, and I think the community and the listeners abroad do as well. The questions and comments are coming in, in our inbox and stuff as well. People are really appreciating y'all taking your time out to do this. So as we said, the bottom line, right, is like, we are on this air. We started IMHO not for the rhetoric, but to have open, honest discussions, bring the decision makers, the power players to the table, and to be open about it, right? So the way that I want to kick this off, as I look at, our black female mayor, our black female police chief, our black news chief editor, right? Our black man of the community, born and bred in the community, who turned his life around. So who is a living witness and example, right? And, my business partner, my friend, here, Max and Razor, so I'm looking at us, right? And so when we talk about accountability, I'm going to take the onus. I don't know if anybody else will, but I'm going to put it on myself. And I challenge everybody else here on this call and every adult listening to do the same. Because we're talking about kids.
Yeah.
When we talking about accountability, let's not forget that we're talking about children. I mean, like, there's some 18-year-old children. There's some grown men that's living their second childhood.
Yep.
So when we say that, to me, the mentors have to be real. And I don't even like the term role models. We got to be real models, meaning that the mistakes that I made, Shadee, the mistakes that you've made, when we're raising our kids, when we impart that truth to them, they can grow up and be able to maneuver, without the unnecessary pressures of I'm a failure or, I'm not going to amount to nothing. We have to be real models, right? So the mentors, our black professionals out there, donate some of your time.
Yes.
Donate your time, and not just the mentors, but the mental health professionals. We had one message come in, and they may have tuned in after this was mentioned earlier. But when we talk about the mental health needs, the access, the resource that's there, that's something like that I challenge, whether it's a grant that council can help get, whether there's a mentoring organization, that we have in town, whether it's No Ego, 100 Black Men, whatever it may be, I'm gonna call you out by name. Like, we need to be there, particularly the professionals that can lend that helping hand. Like I said, if you're listening and you're a mental health provider, why aren't we out there volunteering our time? UVA Equity Center, I know that they're trying to do a job of pooling together resources and to have these virtual situations where people can dial in and whatnot. So there's people making the moves, and we got to be more present about it. Last thing that I'm going to say in regards to that is that, I heard, Brother Shadee mention earlier of, being 35 before knowing how to access mental health, right? And those resources. So my last challenge is directly for the parents, because I know for a fact that a lot of this comes down to, if I don't like a certain person, I ain't gonna be in the room with them.
That's right.
Or if I don't like this about you, then I'm not gonna be a part of your organization or whatnot. And because of our stubbornness, sometimes as a people, we shortchange our next generation. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not gonna put the onus on these kids. I'm putting the onus on us, everybody listening.
Yep.
And Charles, if I could just add to what you're saying, when we call for real change, and what does that look like, and how everyone can get involved. So we know jobs are an issue. Why don't we have a job bank somewhere? Like, you land bank when there's a vacancy and what can be sold off. We have all of these opportunities for jobs, internships, and mentoring that you may not be able to pay them at some level, but you're giving them a skill. What does it look like to be a welder or a mechanic that's making $75 an hour? you can infuse into a person's life. I've recommended job banks. We talk about what does homelessness look like, and how do we eradicate that? There are a lot of people. You want to talk the talk? Do you open your home up? What does your mentoring schedule look like? When you talk about a real-time mentoring, we should have a bank of that.
Yes.
That where we have all of these individuals that we have access to on an Excel spreadsheet that says, this is my skill set, this is what my experience has been. Please match me with.
Yes.
Please match me with. Be intentional about it. We don't all get the 2-year-old toddlers to be the person that we want to be involved in their lives, right? What does that bank look like for available mental health services? Again, we talk about resources, but if there's no capacity because people are stretched to their end, right? They have nothing else left to give. Education and literacy. We should have banks of that. People who say, you know what, I specialize in teaching adults how to read, right? So that they can make informed decisions. The key to what Shadee said earlier is what his pathway looked forward. When he looked out and said he had a pathway, he also had some personal agency where he could see inside that he had the capabilities, the skills, the knowledge to get him onto that pathway, to get him to his desired outcome. We have not created that opportunity in our young adults, where one, they can see their way out of here, and two, where they believe that they have the ability to do that. And we should be being intentional about the resources that we need. And again, these don't come from government. Government shouldn't be the primary source to fix these. Government should not be the primary employer of communities. We should be the primary employer of communities.
Yeah.
What does that look like even in my humble opinion? Are we bringing young folks in, teaching them how to do
Yes,
the radio
ma'am, we is.
I know. I'm not saying you're not. But you know what I mean?
I'm with
like, are they in those places? Are they in WINA? The CBS 19 and 29, and I may have the numbers back, NBC, which one is which? Who knows? Seville tomorrow. Do we have young folks where we're saying, let me teach you how to write? Let me teach you how to get your opinion out there. Here's how you can be heard and nobody can shut you down.
Yeah.
So that rage and anger, you can get it out in so many different ways that can then lead to a productive, healthier lifestyle.
That's right.
If I can chime in real quick, and just to kind of piggyback, but see, with me personally, it wasn't nothing that I could see, right? It was like all I saw was what was in front of me. And at that time was steel doors, right? I was like, nah, this ain't it. This cannot be it, right? Even before then, I was in situations where it amazes me how I'm even alive today, right? Somehow escaping gunfights and stuff, things of that nature that I should not be here from, right? But the thing that I had to kind of answer for myself is this how you want to go out, right? Is this it? Do I want to live my life behind bars? Do I want to continue the cycle of coming into jail, bed after bed after bed? For me, the answer was no, right? Because I was like, I just can't quit. Something has to shake. If I'm trying to change my life, it started with me with my belief system, right? So I had to start changing my belief system and how I viewed the world, and that changed how I dealt with my neighbor. That changed how I saw the person to the right and to the left of me, right? And I was like, you know what? I just can't quit. And that type of mindset, that resiliency, is what led me into the right situations at the right time, right? But for those individuals who don't have that, or who just don't have that type of hope, what can we do, or how can they gain access to hope?
Right.
Yeah, Shadee, one thing that I realized was that people in that situation don't take the opportunities that they don't know exist. You know what I'm saying? So when you don't know something is for you, you can't take that opportunity. And that's a sad place to be in.
Yeah. So to Dr. Brackney's point is not just putting back individuals that mass incarceration took from us, but also empowering and standing behind those who are there in the community right now. Like, there's brothers and sisters I know on the front line right now that's doing good work, who's been doing good work, who just don't have the resources to continue to do it in the capacity they want to do it.
Yeah.
So how does individuals who are trying to position themselves as allies from nonprofits or organizations, how do they then have an impact by channeling resources to those individuals to continue their work. Right? Everybody can't go to South First Street to have a voice. Everybody can't go to Page Street to have a voice. You don't have a presence there, and people don't know that you're there for them, that you care for them. You have relationships there. If you want to have an impact, find out who does, and you get behind them, right? Because not everybody's not meant to be at the forefront.
Well put.
A lot of people, you have the power to be in the background and know that your work is just as important as those who's on the front line.
That's right.
Well put. Well put.
And I just want to that resource piece is so big. Even if we create lists and banks of what people can contribute, it's still different if you show up and tell me for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour a week that you care about me and you talk to me. Mm-hmm. It's still different if you then can say, after you learn what my needs are, you can point me to those needs.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Left as empty-handed as I was before we started building that relationship. And that is the role anytime we talk about, because when we start talking about shifting resources, there's an assumption that these nonprofits get resources just, we are the government, whether it's local, state, or federal, are the reason that these nonprofits have resources in the first place. And then there is the private donors that are funding these nonprofits, and they're usually funding these nonprofits, some of them because passion, but there's also tax implications that they get, to write-offs that they can have from doing these donations. So there's usually a reason. Part of the conversation is how do we kind of steer everyone in a direction where they're not doing this in the traditional way. We're still looking for people who have gone through these very traditional systems, have the most education, and we are still considering them the experts. And these are the same people oftentimes who wrote the policies for mass incarceration, and we're asking them to write the policies, reverse it. That doesn't work.
Right.
And we know it doesn't work, but it's a very comfortable system that we have been recycling through forever. And when you read history and you read accounts of what's happening, no one should be surprised why we're still having the same conversations that we have always had, and that people who were serving in the same roles as we are today had then. And how do you do that? So when you talk about, I don't know what you said about, you said you were 35D now and thinking about mental health, right?
Yeah. I said I was 30 once I actually got to be in front of a counselor.
Yeah, okay. And so the significance, I think, with just take Home to Hope right now, is you're talking about people who are often overlooked, who even as we were attempting to create that program, that people said that these individuals are not qualified to do this work, right? And they were not the traditional individuals, and they did not have the traditional, degrees, letters behind their name to say you're qualified. And what I think, if you talk to the individuals who was hired, one of them is here, they'll tell you that giving them the resources that they may not have had before, or having them see those resources in a different light, being able to say, take or leave whatever information you're getting, that you can serve the people that you are serving best with, is how we change these systems. And so we got some traditional information, so some traditional training, but them being able to say, how do we use this training? What can we take and leave and not have to spend a decade, using a system that may not work, or a program or initiative that may not work, being able to take everything and make it their own, which means that what you have traditionally is, where's the evidence-based trainings? How do we fund what we know that works? And that's not how funding works. I often use the example of DARE. the federal government, they know DARE has never worked, but they don't have anything else to fund. So they keep funding it. Listen to those discussions, they say it, right? Well, what are we going to do if we take this away? And because they don't have an answer, they keep funding it. So they've never had a real strategic plan of how to, do that work around which they were saying war on drugs and how do we help people with that? And there was never an intention to solve that. And so that's, I'm talking about policy issues and the people who are in positions of leadership, like the role that we play. And a lot of us have to remove what we even feel make something successful and give people the opportunity to create it themselves and serve the community as a result of that. And we need more than 4 or 5 people, right?
Yeah.
to do that, and fighting even for the investment into those 4 and 5 people have been something that I've been doing for 3 years now. And so when we talk about the slow pace of change, what if that commitment initially started with 25, 50 people instead of 5 people?
Yeah.
Let me because we have to break this cycle, and like it has to stop being reactive every single time. Is that you get people who don't think it is a crisis until the violence happens in front of the Kroger or it happens on McIntyre Road. It's that you didn't hear a lot of people calling for someone to do something when it was just on South First Street or was on Prospect Avenue.
Well, let me ask you this, because that's a great segue to this. So getting back to what we were talking about earlier, when you had people that said, defund the police. But we're not going to say defund the police while we're trying to solve these shootings and things. I mean, just they go hand in hand. So how do we find that balance to where, Chief Brackney, and it has to be a difficult job for you, but how do we find that balance to where you interject trust in a community, but then you're expected to go above and beyond and solve the crime before it actually happens? Like, I don't see how. That doesn't make sense to me, and I'm not advocating for against the
as they're occurring, right? It's solve crimes as they're occurring. So, you know what? I would just mention something that's been trending on media based on the events that have happened at Capitol Hill, right? And how you can take over an entire building, and they were equating them to the Black Lives Matter demonstrations and rallies after George Floyd, like literally where you just have an entire occupied state and nobody put 1 foot on the Capitol building, right? There was not even a foot on there because it was so entrenched. And one of the things that's been trending on media says, we don't want you to shoot white people like you shot black people. We just don't want to be shot like you didn't shoot them. Right? That's the whole thing. We just want to be treated fairly and justly and equitably. And it doesn't mean you can't solve crimes by doing that at the same time. It doesn't mean that you can't get in front of violent trends by doing those things. Part of the problem is as it continues to be, is because people are connecting this defund with reducing policing, sometimes you actually need more resources to get to, as Mayor Walker said, that sense of justice so that you can do it. When people are under-resourced, overstretched, overtaxed, being asked to do everything on a spectrum, the likelihood that you have a negative outcome is greater. That's regardless of the profession you're in. You have somebody who's in the service industry and they're working 70 hours a week, and now they have to, drive back and forth, and they've got babies to take care of. Something is going to break along there. The problem is when it breaks in policing, it normally costs lives, and the people on the other end of that are often black men, right?
So why don't we talk about racism more?
Why don't we talk? I think we talk a lot about racism. I think what we need to talk more about is supremacy, right? And that's a different thing than being racist, because supremacy talks about the institutions, and often racism lies with an individual. So I may be able to talk with an individual about their issues of racism, but it won't break the structural system of supremacy.
So what do you think affected, like at the Capitol? Because it seemed like because if it had been, in my humble opinion, had it been Black lives up there, we would have had more bodies on the ground.
And again, remember what I just said, because that system is set up on a system of supremacy.
Okay.
And who it was meant to benefit. And oftentimes, you know, I'm not talking about my politics, but if you listen to Joyanne Reid a day or two ago on MSNBC, she said that the reason those exist is because of who they felt comfortable with. Right? The audience that was out there, the protesters, the rioters, those persons who were involved in a revolt, an attempted coup, who did they feel like they were aligned with? When you look out along a sea of a bunch of folks who look like white males, and the people who are policing you look like a bunch of white males, which they typically are, based on the demographics of policing, you often don't feel threatened at all. I've said before over and over again, if my skin feels like a deadly weapon to you, I will always see you as a threat. If I'm always afraid of that. And so it's the system that it's built on as well. And again, if we're talking about diversifying a system, and we've had this conversation before, what does it look like when somebody like me is sitting in this seat? And somebody like Mayor Walker, we talked about it, yourselves, Shadee and Elliott, do we get the same type of support as our counterparts? Or are we always being judged with every word, every facial expression, every nuance of the words, every tone that we use is being scrutinized to such a level that we don't get the opportunities to implement the processes and programs and deconstruct programs to benefit our communities. We're just not given that benefit of the doubt.
That was good. Yeah, let's take our last break of the day. We'll be wrapping this up for the 7:00 hour, and I want to thank y'all ahead of time before we take this break for everything that y'all have done, everything that y'all have said. I know it has definitely helped me. We'll be right back. This is an In My Humble Opinion exclusive where we have deemed this Save the City. We'll be right back.